Political arguments aren't just about facts and figures. They're really about telling a story, a compelling one. In this explainer, we're going to deconstruct the narrative built by former White House senior advisor Stephen Miller during a recent appearance on Fox News. We're going to break his argument down piece by piece to see exactly how he frames the entire political landscape.
And he starts right here. This isn't buried in the middle of his argument. This is his opening shot. This one sentence really acts as the foundation for his entire case. It immediately paints this uncompromising picture of his political opponents, and that sets the tone for everything that's about to follow.
So every good story needs a villain, right? The first part of Miller's argument is all about painting a very specific picture of the story's antagonists, the Democratic Party. He then expands on that opening quote by giving us these 4 distinct labels. In his telling, these aren't just insults. They're meant to be distinct categories that define the opposition. And this is a really key rhetorical move. Why? Because it shifts the debate away from just disagreeing on policy and reframes it as a fundamental conflict of identity. And here's how he connects those labels to a policy agenda. He draws a direct line from an identity like, say, America haters, to a specific set of actions. The list is pretty comprehensive, right? It touches on immigration, crime, the economy, culture. The whole goal seems to be presenting this unified platform that, in his view, is just deeply unpopular. This is how Miller sums up his opponent's whole strategy. After dismissing their policy platform, he boils their effectiveness down to just 2 things: unity and cheating. This quote works to frame any success his opponents might have as being, fundamentally illegitimate. Okay, so now that he's established the antagonist, the narrative introduces its protagonist. Miller presents Donald Trump not just as a political figure, but as the direct counterforce to everything we've just talked about. This slide introduces a classic storytelling trick: inversion. In Miller's telling, every single attack from the Democrats, what he calls their hoaxes and witch hunts, it doesn't actually weaken Trump. Instead, he argues it has the exact opposite effect. It makes him stronger, more popular, and more beloved. This portrayal goes beyond just national politics. Miller elevates Trump to this unique position on the world stage, arguing that while other Western leaders only talk about securing their borders, Donald Trump is the only one to have actually pulled it off. This frames him as an exceptionally effective leader. Now, this focus on the border is very intentional. It leads us right to what Miller presents as the central conflict of his entire narrative: the battle for the U.S. southern border. He doesn't frame this as a policy debate. He frames it as a war. This slide just perfectly illustrates the stark, black-and-white choice he presents. There is zero middle ground here. On one side, under Democratic influence, the language is war crimes and terrorists. On the other side, under Trump, it's record deportations and record safety. It's a crystal clear narrative of chaos versus order. Let's just focus on that phrase for a moment. War crimes. That is an incredibly charged term. It has a specific international legal meaning. By using it here, Miller is elevating the actions of his political opponents from just being bad policy to being a profound criminal violation against the United States itself. But this war isn't just being fought at the physical border. Miller opens up a whole other front: the American legal system. He presents the courts as the next key battleground in this fight for border control. The immediate context for his argument is a specific ruling. It came from the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, and it blocked a Trump administration executive order that was designed to limit asylum access. This court ruling is basically the inciting incident for this part of his narrative. So how does he frame this legal setback? He uses this specific term, radical left lawfare. By defining it this way, he's suggesting that these court cases aren't legitimate legal disagreements at all, but rather they're a form of warfare conducted through the legal system by political enemies, with the explicit goal of undermining border security. In response to this lawfare, Miller lays out a clear 3-step counterattack. First, the administration loses at the D.C. Circuit. Then the Department of Justice appeals what he calls an abomination. And finally, the showdown moves to the Supreme Court. It's presented as a really clear and determined strategy. Okay, and here's where Miller ties all the threads together. The political labels, the border conflict, the court battles, he elevates them all into something much, much bigger. The final act of his argument frames this entire conflict as a fight for the nation's very survival. And this quote is the climax of his narrative. The phrase existential struggle implies a battle for existence itself. He's arguing that the country's entire future is on the line, and he attributes this threat to a political movement that he claims is motivated by a hatred for America and its people. And so it all culminates in this final argument. In Miller's telling, migration isn't just a policy issue. It's a weapon that's used by Democrats to destroy the American quality of life. In this narrative, Donald Trump is positioned as the only person who can save the country from that destruction. So having deconstructed this argument, we're left with a final question for reflection. The entire narrative we've just walked through frames politics not as a contest of ideas, but as an existential battle for the nation's survival. So the question is, when that's the frame, what becomes possible?